What's going on, everybody? Fedor here from 3D Print SOS. Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we are going to be taking a look at these four machines in front of me. We have the FlashForge 5M, the Kingroon KLP1, we have the Infimech TX, and of course the BambuLab A1 Mini. Now this machine admittedly is an outlier here in this comparison because it is just genuinely quirky and strange, but because of its price tag, because what it's capable of, I figured it would be nice to include and kind of just show off its capabilities as well. Now, one thing to be clear here, these are definitely Core XY machines. Some of them are even enclosed. This is a Cartesian machine. However, even with that said, its performance is incredible, and obviously it has an AMS light unit, which allows us to have up to 4 different colors in that machine. Now, for this comparison, I'm not going to be using the AMS system. I will just be using a single color so that it is a closer comparison to what we're testing for this particular video. But I did want to mention that you could always upgrade that machine with an AMS and have that over these, because the manufacturers of these 3 machines don't have that opportunity. Now, there are third parties such as the Chameleon, there's a few others, CoPrint, that you could add to these technically, but we'll not be covering that in this video. Another thing I wanted to say is I'm not going to go into great detail about these machines. This is more of kind of a general comparison on all these. Now, I do have videos on all of these as a live stream that we did unboxing of the first impressions, setup, first prints, that type of thing. So if you are interested in that experience, you can always get those in the live tab on the channel. All right, so just generally speaking, I have a giant 2-page list here of notes. We're going to go over the price, the standout features, of course the cons, of course the pros, and then we're going to check out if I had any reliability issues in all these while I have been using them and who they are good for. So I have a couple things to cover. Like, first we can jump into the price and the standout features, and then we'll go over one at a time. I'll show you guys the prints that they're capable of and their cons and pros and that type of thing. All right, so let's just jump right in to the price and probably the main reason why these things are grouped together in the way that they are. All right, so starting actually with this machine here, the Kingroon KLP1, looks like it starts at $369, and Kingroon was gracious enough to send us a $40 off coupon, so that's going to be linked down below. You can actually use 3DSOS2 as the coupon there, and they have free shipping, so this machine is actually $329 out the door. Then we have the Infimech TX here, which it is marketed as a $299 machine, which was incredible, and upon its release it was $299 with free shipping, but I have heard since then that they have included now a $100 shipping charge, so that's something to keep in mind. This machine is a total of comes to a total of $398. Then we go over here to the FlashForge 5M. That machine is marketed at $299, and it is with free shipping, so the total here is $299. Last but not least, we have the A1 Mini for $249 plus taxes and $15 shipping charge, at least to me, so it brings the total of $280. So that becomes the cheapest machine, obviously without the AMS light unit, followed very closely by the 5M over here, and then the KLP1 and the TX are kind of closer in price at the $329 with coupon and $398. So there's almost 2 segments here. There's kind of like the really cheap printers right over there, and then the somewhat more expensive machines here. But technically speaking, they're all under $400, which makes them bargains, and they all belong in the market for various reasons, which hopefully we'll go over here. All right, now let's just hop into the standout features. We'll keep the order the same just because that's how we started. So we're going to start out with the KLP1 right over here, and its standout features are that it is a really basic machine. So this is a Core XY machine, which is a little bit more complicated than a standard Cartesian machine that slings a bed around. However, I would say this is the most bare bones out of any of them. It even uses a really basic bed design with a single motor. It doesn't have any belt systems, nothing like that outside of the Core XY belt system. So it is a very basic machine that uses really inexpensive parts. So if something was to go wrong on the KLP1, it would be very easy and simpler to fix yourself than any of these machines by quite a bit. The TX right over here, its standout features are that it has this full aluminum build with a glass front door. It uses open source clipper with SSH access. So if you are into that whole clipper thing where you want to modify your own thing, maybe make some macros, maybe customize it to however you want, install some extra features on it firmware wise, this would be the one for that. As well as it's probably, actually not probably, this easily has the best build quality out of all of these machines here. It's extremely sturdy. The aluminum frame is amazing. The glass door feels nice. It definitely feels significantly more premium than its price tag. And technically, I think its most standout feature is that I wouldn't mind putting this machine up against any other machine that I have here in the studio. So that's something noteworthy there. Then going to the FlashForge 5M, it is really fast. It's probably the fastest machine here just out of the box. Yes, you can tune all the rest of them to go as fast, maybe even faster, but this machine out of the box prints extremely fast. It has a very easy to swap nozzles. It takes about 5 to 6 seconds to swap out the entire nozzle system on here, and that is definitely a standout feature, as well as it has add-ons like a enclosure that you can print yourself. So very interesting machine as well, and you know, fast and easy to maintain. That's always nice. That's always nice to have in a 3D printer. Then we have the A1 Mini, which has the Bambu user experience. It's definitely the most friendly out of the rest because it's not open source, it's closed source, so they are completely in tune with the experience for all the way from unboxing to build to being able to print with it, the apps that it uses. You have the whole experience, kind of like an ecosystem that they're developing, and that machine is definitely a part of it, as well as the obvious AMS Lite unit that you can add on later, so you can get in on a very low price, then save up, and then purchase quite an upgrade, probably the best upgrade out of all these machines. The fact that you can use 4 colors if you're into that kind of thing, if you're going to be printing those type of things. So that has an upgrade path, has a very friendly price, and has a really nice user experience, which is very important to machines, especially now that there's so many 3D printers out there. It is a definite standout. All right, so that is, I think, the standout features. Let me take these things off of here, get them on here one at a time, and we'll take a closer look at each one, starting with the cons. All right, let's go. All right, so first up for the cons is the KLP1 by Kingroon. Now, there are a few universal cons for this list. For example, the KLP1, the TX, and the 5M all have the spool on the back, which I typically don't like, especially in my setup where I put the machines. It is very difficult to get to the back. Now, if they're on a table like this, where I can go all the way around and get to the back, no problem, but it is just difficult to be able to rotate the machines when they're sitting on a rack or on a setup like mine. And just worth noting that I typically don't like those. I typically convert them to side spools if at all possible, to make them easier. On top would be even better, but that's worth saying. The other thing is the TX, the 5M, and the KLP1 all have always on fans. This one is by far the loudest one because I believe there are multiple always on fans, but they're all running Clipper. I feel like all these machines that are running Clipper need to have silent, not on fans when they're not needed. And this is something the 5M actually did really well. Upon release of the 5M, they had very loud fans that were always on, but then they turned them all off except for the one that had to be on, I guess, because of the hardware implementation there. But those are the universal ones. The ones that are specific to this is it has a cantilever bed. Now, if this was made about 4 or 3 years ago, I would have given that a pass. But the fact that this has one lead screw and this whole bed is cantilevered, even though this thing is sturdy, that is just an older, very simple design and clearly done to just save costs. And that's why this machine is in this price range, is because even though it is a Core XY fully enclosed machine with a bunch of features on paper, this is how they get around that type of thing. So instead of having a belted multiple Z lead screw setup, they just have a cantilever bed. It's not always bad. For example, the V0 from Voron has a cantilever bed, but it's very small, so they can mitigate that type of thing. This one is using a pretty standard size 220 by 220, I believe, or even, no, 230 by 230 bed size on this. So it is a very large cantilever bed. So for me, that personally, that I see that as a con. The machine is super loud when printing. So it's not loud in the sense where the fans are loud. It is loud where during the movement, especially on the, I guess, Y-axis in this case, because of the way that the machine is built, this is sheet steel, and it is very heavy and robust, but because of the way that it's made, it just resonates on some frequencies. I did have a short put out earlier where I had 5 other machines running in this room behind me at the same time, and I could hear this one over all of them just because of its movement and the way that the sides kind of resonate with that movement. The other thing about this that's a definite con is the screen. Now, if I click the screen here, you can see that it uses a clipper screen, which I typically like. This implementation of it, though, is just too small for its own good. It is also inside the machine, which makes it look pretty slick, but you can't get to it if you're printing, let's say, ABS or ASA. You actually have to open the door to get to it, and it just, not only that it's in a quirky spot, it is such a low quality screen. They actually give you a pen tool to use, and I must say you have to use this on the screen. Your fingers, or at least my fingers, are just too thick. They're just too big to be able to press some of the buttons on the screen to be able to get around. So just worth noting that the screen, for whatever reason, obviously to cut costs to get us into the low 300s here, is a low cost screen. For some people that might not matter, because as you guys know, for clipper machines like this, you're mostly, like 99% of the time, using your slicer, like inside the slicer, or the fluid or mainsail interface for these machines. But it's always nice to have a nice screen on a 3D printer. And then the only other thing that I have here is that I've run into a Wi-Fi bug where the Wi-Fi resets on this machine every time I turn it off. And I did do a firmware update on the machine, and I still have the same problem. So it must be a problem with the latest firmware. I'm assuming that's something that's going to be fixed. Maybe it's even fixed by the time you guys see this video, but it's worth noting. So a short list of cons, but it is an honest list that I have found myself in the time that I've owned this machine. Okay, with that said, let's go to the pros of the machine. Okay, so for the pros, for this price, it is a fully enclosed machine. As you can see there, the doors open quite a bit. The top opens all the way back. This one opens about 45 degrees more than 90 there. So very good setup. You'll be able to print ASA, ABS, and enclosed with the top propped open is definitely great for even PLA and PETG prints, just because it keeps the drafts away and keeps everything inside the machine, and it lets the cooling do a better job because it is more directed. So I would always pick an enclosed machine over an unenclosed machine if I had the choice between them. So that's a definite pro for this machine. It is also very simple to work on. Like I mentioned, all of the parts that this uses are over the counter, as I like to say. You can order a rail, a screw, a bearing, everything, the nozzle, the motors. Nothing on here is unique, which means that you can fix it yourself instead of waiting for you know, another unit or replacement from the company, whatever it might be. If you are the type of person that likes to do things themselves, this one would be very easy to modify or to upgrade or to just maintain over time. So that's a definite pro here. We also, because of that, we also get root access, because all the components that they use here are maker base, so MKS board. So you get SSH access, root access, and you get fluid right away, which is an interface you use on your computer to access all of the settings on this machine, which makes it great. So the clipper is basically open, and more open than some of the other companies that are even here on this list. All right, those are the pros of the KLP1. All right, so let's talk about the reliability of the machine so far in the time that I've had it. I have loud vibrations that I tried to fix with some grease on the rails, because on my particular machines, the rails are not greased whatsoever. So adding a little bit of grease did quiet them down a little bit, which is a very nice thing to note. So if you guys are getting one of these things, I would definitely highly recommend you guys greasing everything on the machine. It would help with the vibrations. And then I did have the belts come loose on my machine during prints, and I was getting some artifacts, and I was able to completely fix that because it has built-in tensioners that are very easy to use right on the tool head. So those are the only things I could complain about with reliability over time. Otherwise, wise, it has been very consistent, as you guys will see in the prints a little bit later of what the prints coming off of this are like. All right, so with that said, what is this machine good for? And I have it written down that this is meant for tinkerers who do not mind getting their hands dirty if something was to go wrong. I say that because the company isn't known for their spectacular, instantaneous help. So that's one of the quirks of this, actually, is that when you buy this, you know what you're getting yourself into. It is the reason why this is not a $600 machine, but a $300-something machine. And all the parts on here are something that you are familiar with and can work on yourself. That is what this particular machine is good for. All right, with all that said, let's move on to the next one. All right, now we're on the Infimech TX machine here. So outside of the spool on the back and the always on fan, some of the cons are that it is a first machine from a company called Infimech. Like I mentioned, it is a sister company of Flying Bear, which I have reviewed many of their machines, or several of their machines rather. So that company is not new. However, the Infimech name is, and the website's new, their support is new, their emails are new, so on and so forth. And from what I understand is this company is aiming to be more towards the American market, whereas the parent company is going to be aiming towards a world company. So that is a little bit better to know, I guess, but it is new. So that is something to keep in mind. The other cons that I have listed here are that the accessories seem to be always out of stock. And the reason why I mention that is because even though this machine is super compelling at this price range, for just about $70 more, you can get a giant auxiliary fan, which puts this up on a whole different level with other machines as well. There's cameras that you can add with AI features. So as you can tell, the few accessories that you add to this thing that they technically advertise on their website could really take this machine to a whole different level. And unfortunately, those are always marked, well, they're just marked that you can't buy them right now. They're out of stock. So that's worth noting that this could be much better, but for whatever reason, it's not currently. So for me, that's a con, because I would like to see a very clear upgrade path for this machine. And then the other thing that I have here is that there is a $100 shipping charge added to this machine. So it is marketed as a $299 machine. However, if you're paying $100 for shipping, well, that's no longer $299, and it seems like a little bit of a marketing ploy to me, perfectly honest. But at $399 with shipping there, $398 I believe the total is, still a very good deal, but it is a con that that $100 is kind of hidden behind a flat shipping fee. So let me know down below what you guys think about that specifically. Outside of that, that's all I have written for cons, which is very good. From there, let's move on to the pros of the machine, and this list is definitely a little bit bigger. So one of the cool things is it has native Orca support. So Orca Slicer, if you go in there, you can find the Infimech TX right in there already. I've been using those profiles without any modifications, and they have been printing absolutely fantastically. So that's great to hear right there. This is a simple one, but the power button is up front. This is something that I've been talking about for a while, is not only the spools on the back are very annoying, but the power buttons on the back are also very annoying, especially in the way that I have my setup over here. I have to reach all the way out back. Sometimes I can't even, have to rotate the machines. This power button is right there in the front. Anyone can reach it at any time. Turn the thing off if something's going haywire, turn it on and off. So easy. That is the perfect placement for a power button. I highly suggest companies take note of that in particular. It has a super high quality build and frame, as well as print quality. This thing has just, like I mentioned, surprised me at pretty much every single level. It is super robust, it's super sturdy, it prints along with the best of them, even some of the most expensive machines that are not double, triple, they're quadruple plus the price of this machine, if not more. So just worth keeping in mind that for whatever reason, this machine is just very, very well put together, and I can only assume Infimech is losing some kind of money on this particular deal. It has LED lighting. You can see very nicely in there. You can turn that on and off. It has a great screen. and a great user interface. I'm usually really kind of picky about the user interfaces on the screens because I have a little bit of a UI background, but this one is very easy to use. You get used to it right away. There's not much hidden. The only negative thing I can say about the UI is when you're in a print, you don't have Z leveling access. You have to go to the front end for the Klipper, fluid interface there to make adjustments for Z, but otherwise it is fully automated and everything is very easy to use on that particular screen. And then also it is super quiet in its printing in comparison to other machines. Now I have been printing a lot of PLA on this machine, especially for this testing, and even though it does not have that auxiliary cooling, I gotta say that the cooling on this machine is exceptional for what it is, especially when you take this little quirky hat off and put it back and let this thing breathe from the top there. So yeah, a bunch of positive things to say and not very many negative things to say. And let's go over the reliability issues. So far, I've had nothing negative to say about this in terms of reliability. It has done everything and printed every material that I have thrown at it. It is enclosed, so you can do your ABS ASA very easily on this machine. The only thing I did notice is because of this, the hinges on this machine, this glass door, as you can see, is very easy to slam both open and close. And the reason why I want to mention that, so I move everything out of the way, there's no rubber sealing around the door, so when you close it, you're closing it onto the metal, and there's powerful magnets on the other end there. So you got to be careful with the door. They even went as far as drilling holes in the glass here so that the screws do not interfere. So definitely something that I keep in mind. The first couple times I opened and closed it, I almost broke this thing. So just worth noting that the hinges are free floating and they don't have any restrictions there for this thing to close softly. Okay, so no reliability issues really. The pros are pretty good, very low cons. Who is this machine for? I have written down here that this is probably the biggest bang for the buck. So it's someone for looking for a good deal, but they don't have to mind about picking an underdog, because obviously this does not have that brand recognition of all the other brands in this comparison. So Infimech is definitely new, and that's just something to keep in mind when you are shopping around. And that is probably the biggest, I guess, con that this machine has going for it, because so far it's just super impressive. All right, let me know if you guys want to see anything more about this machine down in the comments, and otherwise let's move on to the next one. All right, so we are on to the Adventurer 5M. Just a few things I want to say about this is this is irrelevant, but this is the lightest machine out of them all. Obviously, the Bambu has the AMS system on top of it, but with that said, moving these things around, this one is definitely the lightest one. It has a big plastic frame on the bottom, and the other materials that I used are steel, but they're very lightweight in comparison to the other ones, especially that Infimech machine. All right, so let's dive into the cons. So the cons I have here, the spool in the back, the always-on fans. Now, I do gotta say about the always-on fans, they have been really good about releasing updates on the machine over the air. So there's no hassles in updating. Even though this is using Klipper, it's using a pretty locked down version of Klipper. You don't have root access, you don't have front-end interface, but they do have over the air updates, and that makes it really easy for them to do stuff like improving it slightly over time and adding special features. Like I said, the fans are significantly quieter now. They only turn on when they need to, except for the one fan that's always on. I can't quite place which one it is, but it's irrelevant now because it doesn't bother me nearly as much. It is relatively quiet. I do wish it was off, but that is worth noting. So I have here that it has a lockdown version of Klipper. One thing I like about Klipper is that it's open. It lets us do whatever. If I want this thing to do a certain type of meshing, I can install that. If I want to install an app to automate things along with other systems that I have in place, maybe in my house or whatever it might be, if I wanted to integrate, I could do that. That's one of the beauties of Klipper. But this is using Klipper for their own good, and then not really giving us any other access. So it is using clipper, which I like, but it's using it in a way where it's definitely closed down a bit more. So that's just worth noting, that you're not just going to have willy-nilly access to the clipper on this machine. Although with that said, there is a GitHub available for somebody that did manage to install raw clipper on here. So if you are interested in that, at least you have that upgrade path there. I also have that it has expensive nozzles, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword because it is a major pro of this machine, the nozzles that are on here. They're behind this magnetic cover here, and extremely easy, 5 seconds to remove. They are somewhat expensive. Instead of a nozzle costing $4 or $5, it is around $30, $40 for the nozzles, also depending on which type of nozzle you end up buying for this machine. So relatively expensive because that is a proprietary piece on this machine. And it's not just the nozzle you're pulling off, you're actually pulling off the nozzle, heater, and the cooling for the machine as well. So it's just kind of like a singular proprietary piece from FlashForge. So something to keep note of. The only other thing that I have written down here is that it looks unfinished. You have all these holes and threads. They definitely took an idea from another machine about the way that this thing should look. And I think that is a con. Now, with that said, you could cover this up with printable files that they do give you. So there is a bit of a DIY enclosure, but as much fun as that is doing it yourself, it does look unfinished, and the feel that you get when you purchase one of these things, especially if it's like your first or second machine, definitely plays a role in the ownership. So if I was to spend the same amount of money on this and the TX, for example, taking that TX out with the glass and just the smoothness of the exterior and the way that it looks definitely gives you a certain type of feeling over a machine. And I know that might not mean a lot to people, but the user experience is some of the only things that these things, how these things differentiate themselves nowadays, because there are so many of these machines. So to someone like me, it might not matter as much, but I do notice it, and I do notice that this thing looks much more industrial than it can, just by simply covering some of these things up with cheap plastics. And obviously there is a more expensive version of this, the 5M Pro, that is fully enclosed and does look like what I'm talking about, but it comes with a pretty hefty price tag because there's other features that it includes. So it does look a bit unfinished. With that said, let's go right into the pros for the machine. So I have fast with an exclamation mark. This thing is super fast out of the box. It prints really fast, and the OEM slicer does a pretty good job. Now you can use this with other slicers, but I've been using this machine just for TPU. That's what it sits down there on the rack for if I ever need TPU prints. The stock profiles in their slicer for TPU are very good, and that's what I really like using this machine for. The other thing was the nozzle. It has 5-second swaps. I have filament in there now, so it'd be really hard to do, but you squeeze these two things and pull down, the nozzle comes out, and you can put a new one in. You can change it out. If it has a clog, you can take it out to actually do something with. So very easy, definitely a huge pro for this machine, and it makes that part of the machine very easy. And another thing I have here is that it goes to sleep when it's not in use. So let's see if it's already doing it. No, it hasn't been enough time. But what happens is it turns off the screen. It goes dim. The whole machine goes quiet when it's not hot. And it's very easy to forget that this thing is even on, which is actually very nice. It uses less power that way. And I think all machines should do more of that. And I would highly implore FlashForge to try to figure out how to turn that fan off all the way. Because when this thing is not doing anything and sitting completely idle, it should just be dead silent like some of my other machines that I have here. But other than that, great pros, pretty little cons. Overall, a pretty fun and interesting machine. I've had this thing for the longest out of all of them. So in the reliability section, I do have it say that I've had some adhesion issues, and you could see that on this print that we'll go over a little bit later on a few others. It just has its little tiny quirks, and I have a feeling that majority of them are because it prints so darn fast. When I first got it, I was actually slowing it down by about 100 millimeters per second, just because it was going so fast. This cover, with this magnetic cover, would actually come off. So it does just print, balls to the walls as fast as it goes, and which is very nice, especially when you first get it. It's just mind-blowing how fast this thing prints. So that's worth knowing. I did have some noting that I did have some adhesion issues. which I fixed by lowering the Z offset just a hair, and also using a little bit of glue for certain prints that have sharp corners on them. And then the other thing I have here is, well, I just talked about this, is some prints need to slow down if you want higher quality. Like I mentioned, it prints really fast. If you go and slow it down even by 50% on the screen, your print quality goes up right away. So just something to note, that if you guys want to make your own slicer profiles, you can in their slicer, and I would highly suggest you slowing down the machine if you guys want that perfect quality, non-draft as they say. So with that said, who is this machine for? And I have it written that this is somebody looking for brand recognition and support, because this comes from FlashForge, a giant company that has been doing this for a very long time. It has machines, like I said, in the multiple thousands and not just in the few hundreds. They've even had sister companies like BambuLab, so they know what they're doing with 3D printers, and this is definitely a trustworthy company if you want the support and you want that brand recognition, or you need it in some certain cases. All right, with that said, let's move on to the last one, the A1 Mini. Let's go. All right, and last but not least, we're here with the Bambu A1 Mini. Now, this is the smallest machine out of the bunch, not by the physical size of the machine, but by the bed. The bed is a 180 by 180 by 180 is the build area there, and as you can tell, it is just very quirky. It has a quirky screen, it makes quirky sounds, it has quirky motion, it flings poop even when not printing multicolor. So there is a bunch of printable things on here, so just keep that in mind. There is a drawer, 3D printed drawer system, and the AMS unit is moved up because technically the AMS unit will be sitting to the side, and it takes up way more space than any of the previous machines. So at least like this, everything is going upward, so you're not necessarily fitting this into every space that you have, so you got to consider that. If you're just going to buy this machine, it is very compact, as much as compact as on other cantilever machines of this design, but just worth noting that as you put things on it, it does, well, get much larger. So the con is, one of the cons is that the bed size is the smallest of the bunch at 180. Although it's not very limiting, that's still plenty big of a size. In fact, the latest machine that I'm printing, you might be able to see a little peek of it down there, is the Micron 180, and I find that to be a pretty good size. As somebody that uses a V0.2 quite often, 180 by 180 by 180, don't let that deter you too much. You'll be able to print quite a few things on there. So one of the cons that I have on here is it has a super short power cable. That is why it's scooched out a little bit further there. The power cable is not only always attached, it is very short, and I was surprised just by how short it is. In fact, I have to accommodate this machine in some pretty specific ways in my room just so that it reaches down to get the power cable plugged in. So that's just something worth noting, something you might want to look into if you're looking into this machine, is the power cable is just short. I wish it was a single foot longer. I think that would make a pretty big difference. I'm not sure why the cable is short here. And on my other Bambu, the X1 Carbon, the power cable, although detachable, is also a little bit shorter than normal. So just something quirky about that, I guess. I had to create an account just to do a firmware update on the machine. In fact, if you guys go back to the unboxing that I did of the machine, our live stream there, I gave it Wi-Fi access. I was able to do everything from the slicer, but the only way that I could get it to say that it wasn't on the latest firmware was to be able to make an account with BambuLab and connect the account to the machine. And that is a very unique thing for this printer, or for BambuLab at least. They seem to want all of that information, your account information, from you in order just to give you a firmware update, even though the machine is sitting on Wi-Fi and you can access the machine through your network. So I think that is a very quirky, weird way to do it, and it is definitely a con in my book, considering it's the only machine that I've had in a very long time, or ever technically, that has done anything of that nature, just to get to the latest firmware update. And technically I would never have done it, so I wouldn't have ever known that my machine is out of date in terms of its firmware, because there's nothing telling you anywhere. It kind of just says that, especially on the machine in the firmware section, it just tells you that it's on the latest until you sign in and then you know, select this machine under your account, and then you get the message that, oh, you actually do have some updates on this machine. So I just think that that's a con, at least for me personally. I know some of the people during my live stream didn't think that was a problem and thought that was pretty normal, but I think that's just normal for the BambuLab machines. Then the other thing I have on here is that it has a tiny screen, and it is a pain in the butt to use. At least for me, I have pretty thick fingers and some of the things are just small. I do think that they did the best that they could with the UI on there. The UI is actually great, and from speaking to other people about this problem, people just say that they use their slicer or the Handy app, and there's other ways to interact with this. Big Tree Tech even has special products for this type of machine, or BambuLab machines in general, so there are ways to get around using that little screen, but it is little. It's a good screen, it's just the size of it is very small, and obviously they try to keep this machine as compact as possible, and if there was a screen sitting on the outside of it, well, it would just be even more quirky than it already is. All right, so with that, let's go into the pros, and the very first one I see here is it says very high quality prints. I didn't have to do anything to this machine outside of the things that it did for itself, and the quality is just absolutely spectacular. We're going to go over the prints very shortly, so you'll be able to see for yourself, but just that's one of the reasons why people buy these machines, right? So even though it has this form factor, even though it's simple like this and really inexpensive, it punches really, really hard for its price, if not even the best in this category at least. So that is definitely one of its biggest pros. The other thing I have on here is it's very quiet at printing. You do hear some fan noise, but the printing itself is very quiet. You do hear some quick movements here and there, but that's because it's going very fast. You hear it flicking boogers because when it needs to do a filament change, or at least in the beginning when it's purging, that clicking of the nozzle physically hitting the thing, yeah, it makes some noise. But technically speaking, during the print, it is definitely one of the quietest, especially when you have a room full of printers. This one is really hard to notice. So it's definitely quiet in that sense. And then the only other thing I have on here is that the obvious thing, it has the AMS light. You are able to put on 4 more spools of filament on your machine. You can actually have another one off to the side. Obviously you can't print with 5, but you could have one sitting back here as an option for a single spool as well. So technically speaking, that is just fantastic. And at the moment, at the time of making this video, no one's really touching this. There are a few other AMS units coming out here this year, even within this month, so that should be really fun to check out. But at the moment, the AMS light is just a fantastic system, and it takes this really simple machine to the next level, and still for a very reasonable price tag. So it would be insane not to mention the AMS light system when looking at this machine, because they go hand in hand together pretty easily. All right, so that's what I have for the pros there. Let's talk about the reliability. So far, the only thing that I've seen that I could even mention is that I have been chasing some ringing. I'll go over it when we go over the prints a little bit more, but you could see just a little bit of ringing in certain situations on pretty much all the prints that I have. And before people say that it's because this is on top, it's happened right out of the box on the very first prints, and I've just gone over the machine, I've done updates, I've recalibrated it, I've put in different spots. It just happens to be a quirk of my particular machine. I'm not exactly sure why until maybe I find out a little bit later when I have to maintain it in some way, shape, or form. But for now, that is a real nitpick of the whole thing. But that is a reliability issue that I have personally had. All right, so who is this good for? I have here, it is hands-off printing, as long as you don't mind the BambuLab quirks, or the bambooisms as I call them, which some people find the strength is for these machines. So if you don't mind that it is BambuLab and they work the way that they work and they do whatever they do, if you don't mind that, absolute hands-off printing, super easy, anyone can do it, and the quality of these prints, if this came out 5 years ago, people would claim aliens. So yeah, it's definitely a very, very good performer and belongs in this category. All right, with that, let's take a closer look at all of the prints, and then we'll do the conclusion. Let's go. All right, let's take a second to look at some of the prints that came off of these machines. So this was a C-clamp design that I printed on all these machines, and they're all pretty good prints, but some definitely came out better than others. For example, these two right over here, the Infimech being in red and the green from the BambuLab A1 Mini, these are literally flawless. There's not a single nitpick that I have about this. They came out absolutely perfectly. These two in the back here, the purple is on the Adventure 5M and the Kingroon with the blue one here. They had some imperfections, like for example, the blue one has a little bit of a strange texture on the outside, and this purple one, although the texture is pretty good, has a little bit of a stringing issue on the inside here. Now that could obviously be fixed with some settings here, but I used very similar settings on all the machines to keep them comparable, and these are the results that I got. So if I was to pick which machine handled this type of print best, I would say these two are completely tied. I couldn't even pick them apart. There's no way to even know that they're the same. And interestingly enough, these two are in a similar case, but for different reasons. But once again, still pretty good. They all fit exceptionally well. So this thread is not printed in place, but it's supposed to fit in here. There's threads in this section, and then here there is a little piece that fits on the edge, so that when you're spinning this, this part does not spin. So if you're actually using these to clamp, this part helps you clamp things down and actually put some torque on it. So these are that. Let's move on to the next print. Okay, next up we have these gnomes, and I printed them all at the same settings as per usual, except for the one on the A1 Mini, because I couldn't print this 200 millimeters tall. That one had to go down to 175 to fit on the plate, so keep that in mind. But all this is printed in silk filament. This one in particular is from the 5M, and the only issue that I could even spot here, begin to talk about, is the bottom layer wasn't exactly perfect. Although this did not come up, it did not peel, but it is worth knowing that this wasn't absolutely flat just off the spot. But when I printed it the second time, it was perfectly fine. I just didn't continue with the print because, well, it's about the same, except the bottom was just a little bit better. But other than that, like I said, if you look a little closely, this thing is nearly perfect. The seam I draw on there manually on all of them, just keep that in mind. So this is the 5M. Let's move on to the KLP1. All right, this is the gnome from the KLP1. As you can see, the same as the clamp, it has a little bit of a texture on the outside that the others don't have. Otherwise, absolutely flawless. Perfect bottom layer, no problems there. Good on the top here at the peak. Yeah, nothing else to note outside of there. There are some little zits here and there, but that I can just come off. That just all comes off with the finger. No big deal. Let's move on to the next one. All right, this one is on the Infimech, and this is just absolutely perfect print from top to bottom. It feels like actual silk on this one, and just generally a very, very good outcome. The TX killed this print. All right, here's the slightly smaller one from the A1 Mini, and much like the TX, this thing is also nearly flawless. Not even nearly, it is flawless. There's nothing I can complain about here whatsoever. Absolutely perfect print. So 2 minor imperfections and then 2 absolutely perfect ones on the later machines here. All right, let's move on to the next thing. All right, then I decided to print some basic trays. They're all a little bit different, but the outside is the same. Just from when I'm taking things apart or working on something, I figured these stackable trays would come in handy to hold parts and screws. And from the outside, I noticed something interesting. One, the textures are the same as before. The KLP1 just has kind of a texture on the outside that the others don't have. But one thing you notice is this print happens to be a little bit larger than the rest, and they're all, I went back and checked, they're all the same exact size. I even started another one of these prints just to check. But I did notice, like I said, that this one is a little bit larger, so it doesn't fit into the rest. So I actually went back and checked the rest of the prints on this machine, and I noticed that they're all slightly larger. So the KLP1 definitely needs a little bit of extra tuning because something on it is off. I might have to do a firmware update on that machine just to make sure. Not a bad print whatsoever, as you could tell, absolutely great. But for whatever reason, it did print this just a little bit larger, and the C-clamp is a hair larger as well. All right, as far as the rest though, I have nothing to say except good things about all of them. They came out absolutely flawless. So easy to compare there. This is just a little bit of residue left from the glue on the plate on the FlashForge 5M there. All right, let's move on to the next print. All right, and then we have the benchies from the unboxings, except for I think this yellow one was done at a different time. The only thing I have to note here is the one on the Mini and the Infimech were printed really, really fast, and surprisingly, those are the only two machines that I have ever seen and been able to actually read the text on the back. Now, you might not be able to see it on camera, and I tried to do this on live streams as well, but in person, without the lights blaring, I guess at certain angles, you can read the back of there, and that's pretty rare. With that, I did have some issues on the A1 Mini here with this ringing effect, and you do see that throughout the prints on this machine. By the way, it is worth noting that I had this issue before the AMS was on top. I know some people might say that, and I've tried all sorts of things to try to mitigate this, but it does have that issue over the rest of the machines. This one, I believe, was a 16-minute benchy right over here on the Infimech. Then there's absolutely nothing negative to say about the one done on the 5M. It is just almost perfect, absolutely great. A little bit harder to see the quality on this one because of the yellow, though, admittedly. And then on the KLP1, I had to actually reduce the flow rate to 90% to get it to this state because it was over extruding a bit. So it seems to be true that the KLP1, just the way that I have it set up at the moment, needs a little bit more tuning over just all the tuning things that you can do out of the box. But generally speaking, all of these benchies are pretty darn good. All right, so what do we have here? I mean, we have the FlashForge 5M, which is made by a brand that's usually putting out machines in the multiple thousands and not in the few hundreds. Now, they used to have a sister brand called BambuLab. I'm actually not too sure if they're 100% around again, but this is something that I would have expected from their sister brand BambuLab and not directly from FlashForge. I am happy that it is FlashForge, though, because they're a massive company and they have good support. So I'm happy to see this entry-level type of machine coming from FlashForge. Then we have the Kingroon machine. Kingroon has always been in this budget segment. They've always made machines of this type of nature, just a different style. And by that, I mean machines that are made with over-the-counter parts that are using open source firmware. They're very comfortable making machines just like this one. They have been doing it for a while. I've had a bunch of them, and I've liked them for what they are. And this machine definitely fits the Kingroon build. So if you've had other Kingroon machines or familiar with how they do things, this definitely does not depart from their ethos of how they make machines. Then we have a completely brand new machine from a brand new company. Even though this is a sister company of Flying Bear, which I have a history with, this is still a first machine for Infimech. And this machine has honestly surprised me at every single level, all the way from the first initial prints all the way to owning it now for quite some time and printing everything that I have printed on it. It is definitely a huge surprise, but it is new and it is a new brand, so you kind of have that looming over it. And then we have the BambuLab bed slinger that was never supposed to exist because BambuLab said that they were never going to make a bed slinger, and here they came out with not only a good one, but probably the most quirky bed slinger around with its AMS light unit. Now, obviously, this one has a modification to put the AMS up there to take up less horizontal space, so keep that in mind. This usually sits next to it, but it is just so quirky and surprisingly works extremely well. So if you don't mind the bambooisms of how they do it and how they do their whole user experience, that is probably going to be the machine for you. All right, so hopefully with that said, you guys are a little bit more familiar with all four of these machines. There's going to be affiliate links down below, so if you are in the market and I pushed you over the edge on any of these, please use those affiliate links. They help the channel out tremendously and they don't cost you anything. All these machines, as usual, were sent to me by these manufacturers. I don't sign anything. I'm not supposed to say anything specific. There is zero money exchanged. I just love making these videos because I get to showcase these things to you, and they're also different and unique, and that is the part that I really enjoy about them. All right, guys, if you guys have any questions, let me know down below. Please check out the Patreon for this channel. You guys get to talk to me directly, get access to the videos at least a day early, as well as some exclusive content there. We also have a completely free Discord channel, which is a chat/forum where you can talk to like-minded people, share your prints, talk about your printer builds, showcase the cool stuff that you've been making. Lots of people in there, and there's just a great community over there, so please check that out. All right, I think that's all for me for today, and as always, I'll see you guys in the comments. Later.